Alright guys, today we're going to go through how to model our secondary forms. So we blocked in that coil. Um, from a distance, it pretty much looks very similar to that coil. But now we got to go through and do things like punch holes, make sure the edges have the same kind of quality as what we're seeing in the reference, things like adding the stickers to it, everything that starts to help us finalize the model and make it look a little bit more realistic. So what are secondary forms? Um, Secondary forms are, if we look at our primary forms, it usually has 1 to 3 secondary forms inside of it. So I always say if you're trying to determine the difference between a primary and a secondary, just look at if that shape houses any additional detail and how complex that detail is. And that's a good way to kind of start seeing what primary and secondaries are. If it breaks the silhouette while adding some complexity to a larger shape, I would consider that a secondary form. And if it's simplistic enough that it can be modeled by hand. This one will be difficult for you guys to break down at first until you get more modeling under your belt. But there's some things that, maybe it's high frequency noise, just a lot of detail that would take too much edges and too much maintenance for us to actually model it. I'm not saying that you couldn't, it would just be not necessarily worth the time invested, and that would branch into tertiary detail, which we'll learn about coming up, and that's better handled with bump maps, normal maps, displacement maps. So today we're going to use some of these concepts, punching holes in objects, combining multiple objects together to make one part, mapping out topology, controlling edge flow, creating a screw pattern, and transitioning between two complex shapes. So let's go ahead and start looking at each one of these, and then we'll create them on our model.